If you found this video, you're probably looking for information about effectively incorporating multimedia support into your written or oral communication. Choosing the best medium for any particular chunk of information is an important part of successful communication. There are many types of media: spoken words, text, data tables, charts, illustrations, photos, animations, and video. Maybe you want to go old school with some poster board and glitter glue. In some situations, that might be the perfect medium. Generally, spoken words and written text are our starting points when communicating. After that, we need to consider whether additional media will help us communicate. For instance, I could have just posted the transcript to this little video, but I thought adding the sound and the visuals might be more effective. On the other hand, you don't want to waste time and money on multimedia options that don't improve your ability to make your message understood. In this video, we'll talk about some of the ways to make sure your multimedia supports are appropriate to your project, your message, and your audience. The only reason to use multimedia supports for your document or presentation is that they are needed to fully communicate your message, and you're the best judge of that. You've probably tried to communicate by text or email, but then jumped to the phone because that was easier, right? If you're writing a paper or giving a presentation and you get that same feeling of impatience with the words, or the feeling that the words themselves aren't sufficient, you may want to consider some kind of media support. Once you've decided to include visuals with your document, you need to make sure those visuals are neat, clear, and professional. In fact, the document itself should be neat, clear, and professional. I shouldn't have to tell you this, but the visual elements of a document are important. Memos should look like memos. Researched articles should look like researched articles. PowerPoint presentations don't normally need random pictures of puppies and kittens, no matter how much people enjoy looking at them. Make sure your margins are correct. Make sure you're visually indicating the start of a new paragraph. Make sure your title page has the information and the look that it needs. Okay, let's say your document will look neat and professional, and that its form will reflect its function. That's a good start. But what about the multimedia supports? A good time to start thinking about them is when you're working on your pre-writing. If you don't know how to do the pre-writing, we have a video for you. As you're planning your paper, you'll want to plan exactly what multimedia supports will help your audience understand your words. A professional document or presentation will have multimedia elements that are cohesive with the message. That is, you need to demonstrate clear, relevant connections between your main message and the supporting messages sent by your multimedia additions. Cool visuals are great, but they have to be relevant. I could have explosions going off behind me right now, but I probably don't, because those explosions wouldn't help get across my message. If you're using multimedia supports, you need to make sure your audience understands their relevance by referencing them. You can't just put up a slide and assume it speaks for itself. For one thing, that's distracting. Your audience will think about the slide and forget to listen to you. For another, everything has to tie together, and you're the way that happens. Think of aids in a presentation or a document the way you think about quotes. They support your ideas, but they don't stand in for them. So let's talk a little more about connecting your visuals to your main message. Visuals can capture your main point, or they can illustrate the supporting details. It's up to you to determine when the audience will need a little something more to best understand your message. Then it's up to you to determine just what they'll need. When choosing or designing graphics, you need to make sure they depict the information accurately. They need to be fair. Think of your graphics as you think of your quotes. Use them fairly and in the proper context. Tables, charts, and graphs all need to represent the information fairly, and you need to pick or design the one that best does the job you need it to do. A table is simple. It consists of columns and rows. You can fit a lot of information into a table, and they're pretty easy to read. However, a table isn't always enough. Graphing the data can reveal more about it than a table can. Sometimes, graphing data can reveal something that was hard to determine just by looking at the table. Maybe when you graphed it, the information didn't mean what you anticipated. This is one big reason to create your visuals as you create your outline. You don't want any nasty data surprises when you're 20 pages into a project. It's okay if the data is different from what you thought it might be. You're allowed to change your point or argue something different. You must, however, use data visualizations that support your message. Don't present data unless you know what it implies. Sometimes, data needs to be turned into a chart. In fact, almost every time, data should be turned into a chart. unless your audience is comprised of specialists who only want and need to see data tables. For laymen, for regular non-experts, graphs and charts that help interpret the data are crucial. In fact, even when you've got an audience of experts, you may decide to do the work for them by charting out the data. That way, they can focus on your arguments and not get sucked into working through the data themselves. When you're explaining a complex process or a set of unrelated things, a graphic that shows all the parts can be very helpful. It shows the audience how many parts you're discussing, and it means the audience doesn't have to remember all the parts because they're right there. They can see them. An organizational chart can be very helpful. It shows the departments or people and the way they relate to each other. A workflow process chart can show all the actions that have to happen and in the correct order. Often, you will be faced with the question of using stock media or creating your own visuals. Stock media are relatively cheap and easy to find. Sometimes they are a good addition to a document or a presentation. However, it may be hard to find an image that really represents what you are trying to communicate. If the piece of stock media has elements that are not part of your message, this may confuse, distract, or mislead your audience. For a training on how to conduct productive meetings, a stock photo or image might be fine. But a more specific training session, a training on your company's new product line and new reporting structure for reorganized sales teams, that would need custom images and diagrams. Sometimes the audience has to see the real thing or they won't be convinced. If you are selling real estate, you should probably use actual pictures of the actual house instead of stock photos of a house that looks a lot like the one you're selling. If you're marketing a $1,000 aviator watch in a magazine, you need great pictures of the actual watch, not a picture of a watch you took on your dining room table.